Minister, can I thank you for your last comment, and that's the objective that I want here in relation to it. The Inclusion and Accessibility Labs gave a presentation here in the Oireachtas recently, and they pointed out that 41 websites that they audited, just 16 of them were considered usable by people with a disability. And it's not just people with a disability. You know, there are many more people now, because of different reasons, find websites and technology difficult. Now, there has been historically an under-drawdown in relation to the trading online voucher. We have never got to, or there's very few that draw down the maximum of 2,500. So there is sufficient funds. There's always an underspend each year in relation to it. And what we're looking for here is a bit of joined-up thinking regarding this issue.
Minister.
Yeah, Deputy. As I said, I have some sympathy for this argument, I have to say, and we will look at it. I'd like to understand why this hasn't happened to date, to be honest. We don't have to be confined by a European regulation. We can go beyond that if we want to. But we just need to make sure that that is, in a practical sense, implementable as well for the companies that are trying to go online and put in place services or products you know, on a digital platform. But I don't see any reason why, if we're granting those efforts, why we shouldn't insist on them being fully accessible, whether that's an app or whether it's a website or a digital payment platform or whatever. The question is whether we incentivize this through an extra grant or whether we simply require it for all grant drawdown.
Thank you, Minister.
But I will take a look at it and I'll come back to you on it.
Yeah, we don't need an extra grant. There's sufficient money there within the budget. And coming back, Minister, to the Inclusion and Accessibility Labs presentation to the Oireachtas, they, in their handout, pointed out that websites like Facebook, Jobs.ie, Duns, Free Now, Aer Lingus and Dublin Bus, there are difficulties for people with disabilities accessing and utilising their interfaces. And yet companies like Netflix, like the Irish Times, like Just Eat, they can and are easily usable for people with disabilities. So clearly some companies are doing it and some companies are not doing it. Now these are the big players in the field. I'm talking about our own small indigenous companies. There's an opportunity here for us as a country to get ahead of the curve. We've already huge levels of online penetration in terms of sales and in terms of businesses trading online. And this is an additional unique marketing tool that we can capitalise on.
Last Count Corla. Minister, yesterday at the Enterprise Trade and Employment Committee we heard from, we had a discussion about, the barriers faced by persons with disabilities in accessing employment. We heard from the NDA and from the Rehab Group, and I was particularly struck, which is why I wanted to come in on this, by Padraig Hanafin, who spoke about his own experience as a disabled person trying to access the labour market and also from the impact that having a full-time job has given them. So there's massive levels of underemployment and unemployment within the disabled community. And I think this is a very welcome intervention because this is not going to be driven by the private sector. So they're not going to drive it for whatever reason. In individual companies, maybe in small pockets, they might, but this actually requires the state to drive it. And I think the suggestion made by Deputy Naughten in relation to, there's no additional fund required, but in relation to ensuring that, where money is invested, accessibility is counted as part of the measures on how effective that investment is going to be. Because I was very struck yesterday by the untapped capacity that is there, but also by the levels of exclusion felt by some people who are college educated and job ready, but just can't seem to break in. I think it would send a very important message to them as well.
Minister, to conclude.
Look, I think there's a lot of agreement on this issue. I think, by the way, we need to do more in terms of helping people with a disability into the workforce. And there are some super projects around the country that I think are quite groundbreaking, actually, in this space that we need to replicate in other parts of the country. But I think the question here is actually about people with a disability as consumers being able to access services and products through online platforms. And if we're putting money, as we are, into both mentoring and grant aiding and helping to fund businesses to go online, well, I don't think it's an unreasonable ask that if we're picking up 50% of the cost of that for a company, that we would ask them to make sure that designed into their move online is full accessibility. But it's just an area that I just want to make sure I'm fully informed on before we make a final decision. But I'll come back to the House on it maybe the next time we do questions to give you an update on it.